Well, welcome all. I'm Richard Barron. I'm the chairman and CEO of McCormick Barron Salazar, the developers of Orleans Landing. And it's really a thrill for me personally to see everyone here today. I must tell you, this has been a very, very long odyssey that began more than 5 years ago when I came back to Detroit. And as many of you know, I was born and raised at Livernois and 7 Mile, and I really had been trying to come back to work here for a very, very long time. And I was very excited when I came back, really at the urging of my wife, who suggested that Detroit was where it was happening, Richard, and you need to get the hell over there and see what you can do. And we came here, I guess about 6 years ago now, and spent several days touring the city and connected with my dear friend Joel Kelman. We've been friends for more than 60 years and grew up together. And so that began the real story of Orleans Landing. And it's been a really extraordinary 5 years. I was thinking about it last night, and just to think about what we what we did, starting with former Mayor Bing, and on through the appointment of Mr. Orr, and the whole situation with Governor Snyder, on through the bankruptcy, and then with the election of Mayor Duggan. It's been a long time coming, and we're just thrilled that we're here now. And my hope is that the extraordinary investment that's been made by the private sector and the public sector and the foundations in Detroit with the Conservancy and the DeQuinder Cut and this new wonderful interactive center that the state has done, it will in fact now begin to create a whole new community here that will be rising in many years to come. John Stroh really led the way in many respects, and we're thrilled that we're able to be part of what's going on the Riverfront. So I would like to now introduce our first speaker, Mark Wallace, who's the CEO of the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy, who's been working together with us. Mark and I have talked a number of times about work that he's doing and what we can do to help support the continuing efforts of the Conservancy. So Mark, I appreciate your coming up.
Good morning. Thank you, Richard, and good morning, everyone. Today's a beautiful day, and it's a day we've all been waiting for a very long time, and it's wonderful to see so many people here to celebrate this moment in the history of our great city. We have many special guests with us today, which underscores the progress that's being made here, and I'd like to recognize Matt Cullen, the chairman of the board of directors of the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy. We also have several Conservancy board members in attendance today: John Stroh, Laura Trudeau, Larry Alexander, Dave Blaskowitz, George Jackson, and Mark Meranti. 10 years ago, thanks. 10 years ago, which is not a long time, 10 years ago, this was not a friendly place. The edge of the river was scarred by industry and punctuated by cement silos. The roads of the neighborhood have been pulverized into dust by semi-trucks. And if you wanted to go for a bike ride, if you wanted to go for a walk, if you wanted to find a place to take your kids, the Detroit Riverfront was not high on your list. All of that has changed today. Since 2003, the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy has led the efforts to return this neighborhood to the people of Detroit. The Riverfront Conservancy was founded to provide a clean, safe, beautiful, world-class gathering place for all. And we have made that vision a reality. Today, nearly 3 million people visit the Riverfront each year, and that number continues to grow. But we've always viewed the Riverwalk as a stimulus for economic development, and the groundbreaking here of Orleans Landings is evidence of that success. The Riverwalk is an important place to all of us. Every great city has a place where everyone feels welcome. And today, the Detroit Riverfront is one of the most diverse places in our city. It's full of kids, it's full of families, it's full of people from Detroit, and it's full of visitors from out of town. The Riverwalk connects us to nature. The Riverwalk gives us a place to escape the stresses of everyday life. And the Riverwalk brings out the best in all of us. This transformation was built on the strength of public-private partnerships. I'd like to thank the Kresge Foundation, General Motors, the City of Detroit, and the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation for their leadership in this work. I'd also like to thank McCormick Barron Salazar for moving this project forward. This is one of the first of many developments that will take place in the Riverfront District, and it's often very difficult to be the first. Finally, I want to thank Richard Barron. A project like this takes a lot of persistence, and I think Richard has demonstrated that he's a guy who doesn't give up easily. So, Richard, thank you for being here. So on behalf of the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy, everyone who loves the riverfront, and everyone who loves the river, I want to say this. Welcome to the neighborhood, and I'm sure your residents will love the Riverwalk, and I'm sure they will use it frequently. Thank you.
Well, next I'd like to ask Dave Blaskowitz, who's the president and CEO of Invest Detroit, to say a few words. David, in many respects, has been the glue for this development. He is an exceptional servant of this city in a way that, and we have worked across the United States for the last 45 years. David is extraordinary in every way, and he has really been the stabilizing factor in many difficult hours of negotiations. He's been there for all of us when we had issues. He has continued to preside over the redevelopment of the city and downtown in particular, and the corridor in Mid-City. And he really has become an extraordinary friend and someone with whom we can always work and always talk to. So Dave, thank you really on behalf of all of us at McCormick Barron Salazar.
Just for the record, those are all lies. It was a real pleasure working with Richard to get to this point. I just wanted to touch on briefly the work that we're playing off of here. Mark was very kind in kind of framing up the work that they have done here. The infrastructure is a really important part of the concept, but it's the activation of the space that has made this such an attractive amenity for the city of Detroit. And as Mark said, this is really an amenity that is open to all and encouraging all to participate in that space. I think he and his team have done an absolutely terrific job of programming that space. For sure. So 2 seconds. For those of you not familiar with Invest Detroit, we essentially provide support for both business investing and commercial real estate projects in the city. We really focus in on housing and jobs as a primary driver for our activities. The ultimate objectives for us is really density and jobs. How do we create more density, more butts and seats, if you will, in the area? And what do we need to do to increase and encourage job creation as well? So we're very, very proud to be a partner in this transaction with our friends at McCormick Barron and Goldman Sachs. Truly, this was a collaborative effort to get to this point, and we are very pleased to see all of the activity that is taking place outside. So over the past few years, we've been watching what's been going on here in the downtown area. We've been watching these occupancy rates go up, and they've been hovering around 98% for the downtown and midtown areas. That is absolutely incredible. What it speaks to is the deficiency of product that we need to add on. That is a supply issue as far as I'm concerned, and so we're always thrilled when we have the opportunity to see new projects like this adding so many units. But it's also important to look at the type of units that we're adding. One of the things that Richard didn't really highlight is the quality product that McCormick Barron brings to the marketplace. We are thrilled that we have a national developer that is participating in this process along with a national investor. I think really speaks to the size and the value of this particular project. But within that project, within those 278 units of housing, this is not just market rate stuff that we're adding to the market. 20% of those units are affordable units. And I think that that's a really important concept that we continue to promote throughout the city. We are building a city of Detroit for everyone, and we want to make sure that there's opportunity for everyone in projects throughout the city. So with that, we've been engaged in many, many transactions in the city over our 20-year history, but I have to say that I think that this may be one of the most significant projects. Just looking at the team, I think, begins to identify why that's the case. We have, as I mentioned, a national developer. We have national investors. We have the city of Detroit, and George Jackson from DEGC had done a lot of heavy lifting. So, George, I want to make sure you get some acknowledgement for the work on this project. I know that it's going to give us more on that, but really, really terrific work there as well. So. More importantly, again, is the impact from this well-designed product and what it will have. We are already in discussions on multiple projects on the Riverfront, so we know that this is going to have a multiplying effect for this particular area. Very excited about it. The last thought I want to leave you with is I hope everybody brought a camera or a phone, because I expect everyone to take their before picture before they leave today. And I'd encourage you to come back shortly and look at the after. You'll be amazed. Thank you.
Well, as some of you may know, as we began to work through the financing of this first phase, we had a number of conversations here in Detroit, and fortunately for us, we had a group in New York, the Urban Investment Group of Goldman Sachs, that had been doing some really extraordinary investing in different markets throughout the United States. And we were fortunate at that point in time to have the ability to talk to then Alicia Glenn, who headed up the group, and the Goldman folks who are here today, and Margaret Anadu will speak to us now, Managing Director of the Goldman Sachs and Urban Investment Group. And very honestly, without their support, it's hard to imagine how this would have really happened. They were there, they continued to be supportive, and they spent a lot of time talking with David and talking with others here in Detroit to understand the market, what was happening, and that in turn led them to invest in their 10,000 small business program, which they've done now here in Detroit. So Margaret, if you would if you come forward and say a few words, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
So I think it's sort of easy to say that we're all really happy to be here and thrilled to be here. I think in the Urban Investment Group at Goldman Sachs, we feel a little differently. We feel compelled to be here. It feels urgent. It feels important. I think, we all work on projects like this, some of us around the city, some of us around the country. And I think when we step back and think about what we're starting today, it's a model. The entire country is watching the way that Detroit rebuilds itself and becomes a model for community development and economic development around the country. It's going to stay with people. It's going to help rebuild cities far from Michigan and beyond these borders. So I think it's really important what's happening today beyond just this riverfront and just this one project. Some of the speakers before me have mentioned just what a partnership this was. We work a lot in the Urban Investment Group with public sector and public-private partnerships. This was the public-private partnership of epic proportions. There were so many partners in this deal. I think it's hard to even name them all, but there's real particular effort, and we were very impressed by the folks at HUD. 2 or 3 entities from the state, the city, Invest Detroit, of course, Detroit Economic Growth Corporation, LIS, Kresge, Ford. This is really just a best-in-class partnership from the local folks to, as Dave mentioned, some of the national players that have been involved. And it's also just been a real pleasure to get to work with McCormick Barron in Richard's hometown. This is quite a homecoming, and just this is even more special than some of the work we've been able to do with McCormick Barron around the country. And as Richard mentioned, this isn't just one project that Goldman's committed to. This $7 million that we invested in this project is actually part of a broader commitment we've made to Detroit. This is an important city, it's an important place, and it's an important time, and we think it needs a real comprehensive approach. So this is our first investment in the real estate, in the brick and mortar of Detroit, but we've also made, it's part of a $30 million investment we've made to date, also really supporting the small businesses and entrepreneurs in this city who are also going to be part of bringing the city back and supporting employment and really adding the services to the riverfront that we need. So kind of a shout out to 3 of our 10,000 small businesses who are here today. Hopefully you've enjoyed the food from Ethel's Edibles, Edibles Rex, 14 East, who are also a big part of this revitalization. And I'll just end with a shout out to Sherry Wang at Goldman Sachs, who's the actual A-team and person who really did all this work and made this all happen, and Anu Shah, who is, I think, somewhere over there as well. And again, we're just really happy to be here. We're thrilled. We're honored. This is important, and we're excited that we're here. Thanks.
Thank you, Margaret. I'd like to now introduce Mark Meranti from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. They were extraordinary partners in this effort. Joe Martin, who has subsequently left, was just a wonderful, wonderful individual who helped shepherd this through their bureaucracy. And Mark, we'd love for you to say a few words.
We're the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, Richard. We're not a bureaucracy. Thank you. Let me take you back, excuse me. I'm going to take you back about 45 years because that was really when I was a kid in Detroit. One of my first jobs while I was going to college and trying to get through that debt free, I loaded coal trucks, right? I think about there on the riverfront, and there was a big pile of coal. It wasn't the very most attractive or the best use of the property at the time. I think what we see today is just the beginning along the riverfront. I have to give a shout out to my former boss, Doug Rothwell. Matt, you'll remember this story. And as you were a part of it, right? And John Engler, when we were working with General Motors at the time, and what could we do? They had just moved into the RenCen. What could we do to really invigorate the riverfront? And the governor said, well, we have a tricentennial coming up. We should have a state park on the riverfront. And I think that really started to build a catalyst for this kind of development. And that, along with some of our other programs that governor allowed us to create, and this governor, Governor Snyder, has allowed us to put in place, like our community revitalization program, which combined, we have about $14 million into this project. We'd like to get some of that back. We're really excited because this really is a catalytic development. You know, you're seeing, when you look to the west, you see the RenCen. You look to the east, you can see all the way to the bridge, and you really could envision what this could be. And this is 4 square blocks. This isn't just a building. This is really exciting. And if you look around the country, I was having lunch with an investor from Chicago yesterday, and he said, you know, when my kid graduated college, And at the time they were living in Indiana, he just packed up his bags and moved to Chicago. Didn't have a job. But Chicago's a cool place. So he wanted to go there and he wanted to live in a cool city. Detroit's a cool city right now. And it's getting cooler. Or maybe I should say it's getting hotter. So I just want to congratulate your homecoming. I thank you for coming, and I thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask Linda Forte, please, the chair of EDC, to come forward and say a few words and how much we appreciated their support all the way through as well.
Thanks, Richard. Well, the EDC is one of 7 public authorities that's staffed by the DEGC to encourage development and investment in the city. And so what the EDC does is support private investment, business growth within the neighborhoods throughout the city of Detroit using some tools like land acquisition, grants, loans, taxes, and other funds, including bonds. So the EDC was very proactive in creating this district. And more importantly, we transitioned this area from industrial, where it was filled with cement silos just a few short years ago, to one where the Riverfront is now open to Detroiters. This project will add a neighborhood to the area, which includes a state park, as you've already heard, a river walk, and an outdoor adventure center. I'd like to acknowledge the EDC board members and the Brownfield Authority board members for their leadership in getting this done. Could you please stand, those of you who are here? And some are probably standing in the back. Just please acknowledge them. And I'd like to especially thank the DEGC staff for their diligence in working with a myriad of partners to move this project forward. I'd like to recognize Rod Miller's leadership in heading the DEGC, his predecessor, of course, who's been acknowledged, George Jackson, for this project. And Brian Holdwick. Is Brian here? He's in the back. A senior member. Brian's a senior member of the team who's worked on this project from beginning to now. So thank you all. As a Detroiter, a proud Detroiter, and executive at Detroit's oldest bank, I'm excited to see the new investments happening in the city. The Orleans Landing project represents significant progress from where the river was, primarily industrial. It is the first new construction project on the river, which is truly transformational. The project's being led, of course, as you already know, by McCormick, Barron, and Salazar, and brings together a top flight of equity partners. I think you've heard already that this is going to be a project that includes retail and restaurant, residential, and really this represents over $60 million in investment. I know that projects like this, as a banker, take tremendous tenacity, commitment, and vision. There are a lot of organizations that came together to make this work, and it is significant for the city. So in addition to direct project investments, there needs to be supporting infrastructure and other supports. And the EDC was glad to play a role in this project for over 10 years, including demolishing the abandoned commercial or industrial buildings, contracting for site remediation of 5 Orleans Landing development sites with a value of $1.1 million, and extending a $1.7 million development loan. EDC's indirect involvement leading up to the project include property acquisition from the years 1999 through 2005, facilitating the East Riverfront District Plan in 2004, constructing new roads in the East Riverfront adjacent to the Orleans Landing, value about $8 million, and that occurred from the years 2008 through 2010, constructing the DeQuinter Cut, the DeQuinter Trail. Those projects together were $4.5 million in investments, and acquiring the former industrial and commercial properties comprising the Orleans Landing site. Our partners at the Brownfield Authority secured $5 million in Brownfield tax credits, $6.5 million in tax increment financing reimbursements for the Michigan Strategic Fund. These were non-environmental activities. $3 million in TIF reimbursements for MDEQ environmental activities, and $1 million in MDEQ cleanup grant. Also, the DEGC assisted in securing a commercial rehabilitation abatement for the project. In closing, I'd like to say congratulations to all of the participants in this project for their dedication in making development a priority for the city. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I wanted to take just a few minutes personally to thank some whom I haven't mentioned up to now. I think I mentioned the fact that I came back about 6.5, 7 years ago, and one of the first conversations that I had was with George Jackson and Brian Holdwick and Will Tominga about the possibility of doing something on the riverfront. What I hadn't mentioned to them, and I have subsequently said to many, my maternal grandfather had a store on Randolph just a few blocks from here, where I worked as a kid and was well aware of what was going on down here. And I think that there was really something extraordinary that happened when I first met George and Brian, their willingness to discuss the possibilities. I mentioned that I had been born and raised in Detroit. My parents had gone to Wayne. My grandparents on both sides were immigrants here. And for me, it was a very special time to come back and to really see if there was a way that we could, in fact, help with the extraordinary efforts that have been made by many here in helping to rebuild the city. And so that began a long and protracted set of conversations. I was then meeting with Dave Blaskowitz, and with it all was my good friend Joel Kelman, who was with me every step of the way as we began to navigate our way through all of the things that had happened here in the city. I particularly wanted to thank Jack Hambean, who's been my senior project manager, who is actually with Councilwoman Sheffield now, finishing up our tax abatement at City Council this morning. And I told Jack, you stay over there, and I'll cover for you. And she would have been here as well, but she felt it was very important to make sure that all of that happened. I think that the most exciting part of all of this has been the election of Mayor Duggan, who will speak to us in a moment, and the extraordinary team of people who have come in to support his efforts here, Jed Hobart and Arthur Jemison and Matt Walters and Maurice Cox, as we have transitioned through the bankruptcy, through the election, and on into this next phase of work. It's really been a treat to watch all of this coming together as we have been working to close and go to construction. I particularly wanted to thank both Kresge and the Ford Foundation for their support. It was a difficult project. You've listened to all of the various kinds of financing that are part of this effort, and their involvement really made it possible for this to happen. I wanted to particularly note the O'Brien-Brinkman partnership, who are out on our site building now, Dave Doomey, who worked as McCormick Barron Salazar Senior Project Architect, working through all of the various issues with the exceptional work that Hamilton Anderson has done in a very, very difficult site. And Ray Rybeck, who's now managing our construction. And particularly wanted to note my partner, Kevin McCormick, who worked with the Goldman Sachs folks and Dave and everybody at MEDC as we navigated through the financing of the project. But most particularly, I thought it was important this morning to take a minute to talk about the women who've made this project work. I have been now more than 45 years developing in cities across the United States. And the collection of women who have brought this project to the point where it is today here in Detroit has really been quite exceptional. And I begin with my wife, and then I mentioned Alicia Glenn at the Urban Investment Group, Laura Trudeau at Kresge, who did enormous work here on the Conservancy project and who subsequently committed to this project early on, made it a very, very important kind of commitment that helped us ultimately to bring Goldman Sachs to the project and helped me to discuss the project with the Ford Foundation. The work that Laura did, Faye Nelson, in terms of the Riverfront Conservancy, Mary King, who works with Dave Blaskowitz, who was terrific in terms of helping to support what was going on. David and I would talk, and then Mary would do the work. Stacy Fox, during the period of the financial manager's tenure here, was very, very helpful to us, and she did a terrific job. Was very, very supportive. And of course, at UIG, Rachel Diller, who is here today, did an exceptional job with Sherry Wang in navigating this project through the financing, trying to balance the interests of the state and David and the foundations and all the investing that had gone on, and did a terrific job in supporting what was going on and really was, on the financing side, just critical to our success. And just a few others, Becky Navin at DEGC did a brilliant job with the lawyering. This was a very, very complicated project. Title work that had to be done and things that just needed to be brought into 2015, 2014 that just hadn't happened. Becky did a wonderful job, and then Daniela Gracefa at the law firm did a wonderful job as well, working on all kinds of issues related to the easements and other kind of legal documents. And then Stacy Esbrook at MEDC, who worked with us all the way through on the credits and all the kind of support that we got from the state. Danielle, of course, is here and did a wonderful job for us on the private side. And so I think that it's important when you go through the kind of 5-year odyssey that we've been on to close, that we recognize those people that have been instrumental in making this happen. It has been a long time coming, and for me personally, it's very gratifying that we're all here today to really see this move forward. I'm advised by our contractor that within a few days we're going to start to see some of the framing going up, and so we'll be vertical here in a short period of time. And we will be building out through 2016. Hopefully by the end of next year we'll be almost complete, and we'll have a new community here that will be, I think, exceptional and very exciting. And with that, I'd like to introduce the mayor, who graciously came over here this morning after the horrific events of last night, and we really appreciate his being here and working with him and his terrific team that he's assembled, and would like to ask him to say a few words. Mayor?
Well, thank you, Richard, and congratulations to you and Goldman and all the financial and foundation and governmental partners who made this possible. Appreciate Butch Hollowell covering for me here. When you make plans, so often life intrudes, and I just came from Detroit Receiving Hospital, where I was visiting with the two EMTs, Alfredo Rojas and Kelly Adams, who were injured very badly last night, just trying to protect us. A routine EMS run on somebody with an injured ankle, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it turns violent. And what I can tell you is that at Detroit Receiving Hospital, which many of you know I ran for 9 years, they consider the EMTs a part of the family. Those ambulances are in and out of there all the time. They are being totally embraced by the doctors and nurses. And as I told them, everybody in this community is thinking about them, and our thoughts and our prayers are with them. And the story is just remarkable. It's pretty obvious that Kelly Adams saved Medic Rojas's life by intervening on a man with a box cutter. I mean, it's just amazing heroism, and then drove them both to the hospital. And so I know the fire commissioner and the police chief are dealing with those issues. But Richard, I appreciate you understanding. I didn't know if I was going to make it here, but fortunately everybody talked long enough. I got to be here. So 2 years ago, when Richard showed me these plans for this new construction on the riverfront, I thought, in Detroit, really? It just wasn't what we had come to expect. And he was visionary in his approach, as were the people who supported him. And then shortly later, another gentleman by the name of Walter Cohen told me he was going to build new apartment buildings in Lafayette Park. And you get a sense that we have fundamentally turned a corner. Yesterday, I was at a groundbreaking on the other side of Jefferson, over in southwest Detroit, at the old Southwestern High School, where Sakti, a auto supplier to General Motors and Ford, broke ground on a new manufacturing facility that's going to employ another 350 people. So we're building places where our residents can work and places where they can live. And one of the things that's critical to me is that as we rebuild this city, we rebuild it in a way that includes everybody. Because if this city comes back and excludes the longtime Detroiters, we haven't accomplished anything. And that's why I'm so pleased that there's a 20% affordable housing component in this. We are building a housing development that's going to be beautiful, but is also going to be open to everybody. And just one last note of thanks. These things didn't just pop up overnight. You look at what the Riverfront Conservancy did, and Matt Cullen and Faye Nelson and all of those folks 10, 15 years ago who said, okay, Detroit developed along the water in an industrial manner, but the great cities in this country, the public has their waterfront. And when you saw the cement silos out here, it was inconceivable that someday you'd see the silos go out parks here in this kind of housing. But at a time when nobody thought it was possible, they started moving right down the river. And because they have reclaimed the riverfront for the public, it's made it possible for housing projects like this. And I suspect before too long, we're going to hear about other housing projects along here. And so today is another step in today's rebuilding. And Richard, I just want to say congratulations.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor. That concludes our formal remarks. We'd like to invite all the folks who are up on the podium here to go outside. We've got a little groundbreaking ceremony, and we're going to turn a little dirt. And thank you all for coming. It was great to see you all here. And we invite you all back for the ribbon cutting when we'll have some new product here in another 10 months or so. Thanks very much.